Hello, Jason here, back with another video about, I'm going to update you guys on the Stephen King reading project. I did a video a couple weeks ago about kind of what I was doing with that. It's basically I'm reading all of Stephen King's published novels in order that they were published, starting at the beginning and going through till today. I'm about halfway through. But today what we're going to talk about is the novels that he published in the 1970s. So basically I'll give you updates of each decade as I get done with them. And actually I read these books a while ago. I'm through the 70s, obviously. I'm through the 80s, and I'm about halfway through the 90s. So yeah, anyway, today we're just going to talk about the 70s. And we'll start just at the beginning. His first published novel was Carrie. Came out April 5th, 1974. Yeah, really great book. Really good book for a first novel. It's super tragic, super sad. It's about this girl. She's in high school and she gets bullied by everybody basically. And her mom is like super religious and like super overbearing and like doesn't let her do anything or whatever. And yeah, so she starts she starts her period like at school, and she doesn't know what it is because her mom never like told her anything and stuff, and she's bullied about that. And then after that she starts to develop these like telekinetic abilities where she can move stuff with her mind and things like that. So yeah, and then stuff happens. She goes through life, whatever, and then at the prom, they play like a really cruel prank on her, and she just snaps and she kills everyone, like destroys the whole town, basically. Yeah, really, it's just a really great book about I don't know, just. It's really sad. It's a tragedy. Like, you feel bad for Carrie, and then she just can't control herself and she kills everybody, and you're like, damn, Carrie, you're nuts. But yeah, it was his first novel. In fact, he was writing this novel, didn't like it, or didn't think it would sell, so he threw it in the garbage. And his wife pulled it out of the garbage. Read it and was like, you gotta finish this is really good. And if she hadn't done that, if she had just taken the garbage out, we never would have gotten Carrie, and who knows, we maybe never would have gotten a Stephen King. He might still be working in the laundromat, or teaching English. So yeah, thanks, Tabitha, you're great. But anyway, first novel, knocked it out of the park. It's really good. Moving on, second novel was Salem's Lot, published October 17, 1975. Yeah, man, this is a good book. This is one of my probably top 5 Stephen King novels. And it's kind of, it's basically like his sort of modernized retelling of Dracula. It's a vampire novel, and I will say, if you haven't read Dracula, you should read that first. It's pretty short, and it's really good. It's kind of old, but so the language is maybe a little dated, but it is very good. And the parallels between that book and this book, the story, like this book is obviously an homage to that. But damn, this book is good. It's yeah, it's a vampire novel. Basically, vampires come into this town. They start turning people into vampires and take over. And it's up to these kind of whatever 3 or 4 people to try to stop them. It's a good one. Super creepy. Really good. Like October read if you want to just read something creepy in the month of October. I highly recommend Salem's Lot. Again, top 5 for sure. Next novel is going to be The Shining, published January 28, 1977. This is probably his most famous novel. maybe. Maybe this or it, but this novel for sure is one of his most well known. I think mainly, or at least partly, because of Stanley Kubrick's film that came out in 1980. Um, yeah, which Stephen King didn't like the movie very much. Stanley Kubrick took a lot of liberties, changed a lot of stuff, and yeah. So even if you've seen the movie, even if if you enjoy the movie, I enjoy both actually. I think the movie's a masterpiece, but you can still read this and get a lot out of it that's different, and you'll be surprised still. So yeah, the what is it about? If you don't know what The Shining's about, then you've been living under a rock for the last 40 years. But basically, it's a story about a guy and his family. He's like hired on to be like a caretaker at this hotel, and so basically his job is to go up there during the winter when the hotel is closed. It's in the mountains in Colorado, so basically it gets snowed in October. It's inaccessible. No one can get there until it thaws again in like March or April or whatever. So his job is to go up there and make sure that that the boiler doesn't explode. Basically, I mean that's basically what he's doing. And he's a writer, so he goes up there and he's like, okay, cool. I'm going to be secluded. I'm going to be by myself. I can just sit and focus on my writing, and yeah, be with my family. And he's an alcoholic. And he thinks like, oh, I can go up there and I can just be away. Like there won't be any alcohol. I won't be able to do any of that. So yeah, that's basically the story. And then of course the hotel is haunted, and his kid has this special power called the Shining, and where he can like communicate with people through his mind. He can he can communicate with these ghosts, and the hotel feeds off of his shine and gets more powerful. Because he's there, and so then the hotel kind of corrupts his dad, and yeah, and then the dad tries to kill him and stuff. Yeah, it's really really good. There's a reason that this novel is one of his most well known, and it's not just because of the movie. That's a part of it, but it's also really good. And yeah, so what can I say? The Shining. If you haven't read it, you should read it. Next one is actually, Richard Bachman was a pseudonym that Stephen King wrote a handful of novels under, and this was the first published novel that he wrote. And he wrote this book before he wrote Carrie, but it wasn't published until a few years later. But it's called, I don't have the actual copy of it because it's been out of print for a long long time, but it's in this collected Bachman books, so it's Rage. It's the first one in here, and yeah, it's not great. It's probably my least favorite Stephen King novel that I've read so far. Yeah, not great. It's relatively short, so that's what it's got that going for it at least. But it's about this kid. He's a high school student. He brings a gun to school one day, kills his teacher, holds his class hostage. To what end? I don't really know. It's kind of just forgettable. It's been a while since I read it. I don't really remember what he wanted really. But yeah, he somehow at the end gets the kids on his side, and they end up doing something to this bully. I don't know. It was, like I said, it was kind of just not good. So I mean, if you're a completionist, you want to read every Stephen King novel, go for it. Whatever. It's not that great. You can skip it for sure. And like I said, it's been out of print for a long time. You can find it you can find these Bachman books relatively easily on like Amazon or Thrift Books or something for like $15 or something like that. But yeah, if you want to get the actual Rage Richard Bachman paperback, you're gonna have to spend a lot of money on like eBay or something. You can find them, but they're expensive. So yeah. That's all I'll say about that one. I don't. It's not great. Um, the next one is a short story collection. It's called Night Shift. It's published in February of 1978. And all of these, or I think most of them, maybe not all of them, but majority of them, these stories were already previously published in elsewhere, magazines or whatever. And then so this is just like a collection of those, and there's some really good stuff in here, some nice gems. Two of them. So we got a prequel to Salem's Lot called Jerusalem's Lot, which is about the town kind of before the events. It's like in the 1800s or something, so it's a couple hundred years before what happens in Salem's Lot. And then we've also there's a sequel called One for the Road, which is like about kind of what happens afterwards, which was really cool. And a lot of these, back in the 80s when Stephen King movies were coming out all the time, and they were usually like really just kind of pulpy, trashy horror movies. But a lot of these stories were made into movies, like Graveyard Shift was made into a movie. The Mangler, Trucks. It's a great short story. It was made into a movie that Stephen King directed called Maximum Overdrive. Sometimes They Come Back was made into a movie. The Lawnmower Man. Although I haven't seen the movie, but I don't think the movie has really anything to do with the story other than the title. I don't know. Like I said, I haven't seen the movie, so maybe I'm mistaken about that. That was a weird one, though. Very strange story. Children of the Corn, So there was a lot of this stuff that kind of turned into the Stephen King pop culture-y, like wave of Stephen King movies that came out in the 80s. Now, granted, not all of them were very good. The stories that they're based on are great, though. All of those are actually, the ones I mentioned are pretty good. There's one also in here called Night Surf. That was kind of like the basis for, or like the idea behind The Stand. So it's about this virus that gets out, and there's these people on the beach that are trying to, there's just a group of people that are trying to keep from getting infected. Really cool little short story collection. Again, if you've read Salem's Lot, it's almost worth just picking this up just for the prequel and then the sequel short story. So, highly recommend that one. The next one is The Stand. Big, huge book. A lot of people who read, a lot of Stephen King fans consider this his best novel. It's kind of a toss-up maybe for me. I've got a few of them that maybe I would say are better than this, but not many. This is definitely in the top 5. It's amazing. And so this is the uncut version. This is the version that came out. So the original one was published in October 3rd, 1978. This one came out in the 90s. And so in 1978, he had this big fat manuscript that he took to his publisher, and they told him that he needed to cut like a third of the book out because it would be cost prohibitive for them to publish it. And since at that point he had only published like 3 other novels, he was not, this huge household name that he is today. At the time, I think if he had been, they would have just published it because nowadays Stephen King can publish anything he wants. It doesn't matter. He could publish a 5,000 page book and people would buy it. I certainly would. But no, back in the day, they didn't want to publish it because they didn't think people would pay that much money for a novel. So they made him cut like 400 pages out. I think I haven't, like I said, I haven't read the original edition. It's kind of hard to find. It's been out of print since this one came into print 30 years ago. So you can find them on eBay or thrift books or whatever. But and maybe I will at some point go try to track one down and read it. But pretty much the consensus is that this one is better because this is the version that he would have put out originally with a few updates. you know, when he updated it to the 90s, or in 1990 when he updated it, he did change some of the references. Like there's references to HIV and stuff in this, things like that. So yeah, um, that's that's the long and short of it. But basically, it's about a story about like the end of the world. Basically, this weaponized flu virus that the government is developing gets out into the public and infects everyone, and it's 100% mortality rate. No one survives it. If you get it, you're gonna die. And so basically, it kills everyone, other than this tiny, tiny sliver of the population. It's like 99.9% of everyone gets just killed in a matter of weeks. And then it's kind of about like this. There's like these two kind of factions that arise. There's like the good guys and the bad guys. So it's like this good versus evil kind of tale. It's also about rebuilding society and what's important in a society and how that all works. But damn, it's really good. I mean it's one of his. It's certainly one of his best novels. The first 450 pages, like the fall of society, is masterfully done. And a lot of post-apocalyptic books kind of just skip over that. You get into it, and the world is already in ruins. This book doesn't do that. This book starts off, things are normal, people are living their lives, they're loving each other and stuff, and then shit goes down and the whole world gets destroyed, and it's crazy. So yeah, and tons and tons of characters. Really, really, it's just so great. It is, yeah. It's one of his best novels, but for sure. So read it. Next one is another Bachman book. So this one is the second one, published in July of 1979. So this is called The Long Walk. It is about a like a game show, I guess, or a contest that happens every year where 100 boys, I don't know, there's probably an age range, but I can't remember, in their high school age or whatever, they sign up and they just do this contest where they walk. They start in Maine, they go down the East Coast, and they just walk. And they aren't allowed to stop, and they aren't allowed to. There's like a speed limit that they have to maintain, and if they drop below it more than, it's like they get 3 warnings, I think. And then if they stop or whatever, they get killed. They kill them. And so yeah, and then whoever's the last person that's still walking at the end wins. And they win. It's ambiguous as to what the prize is. I think it's just kind of you're just famous and you get to have whatever you want, I guess. But yeah, it's like the Hunger Games kind of, but like before the Hunger Games. I don't know. I mean, I don't know what the first like battle royale type game show type book or story was. This probably isn't it, but it certainly was an early one. This is in the 70s, so it's the idea's been around a long time. So anyway, it's very good. It's probably my favorite Bachman book. It's a good one. And then here, the last novel in the 1970s is The Dead Zone. August 30th, 1979, originally published. This book does not get enough credit. It is so good. It's another one. It's probably in my top 10. It's so good. It's about this guy who, it's less horror-y too than all of these other novels. It's more supernatural sort of love story almost. But anyway, it's about this guy. His name's Johnny Smith. He is like getting kind of he's dating this girl, and they're getting pretty serious. They're like, I'm probably gonna get married or whatever. And then he gets in this car accident, and goes into a coma. He's like traumatic brain injury, goes into a coma for like 4.5 years. And so at some point during that time period, she is, she's pretty convinced that he's probably not going to come out of it. So she moves on with her life. She marries some other guy. She has a kid or whatever. And then he does wake up. And so that's, it's that whole part of it is like really sad because it's all the like what their life could have been if this tragedy hadn't occurred. But then also, once he wakes up, the brain injury caused him to develop like psychic powers. So basically now, if he touches somebody, he gets like flashes of either their future or their past or details about their lives, and he doesn't really have control over it. It just happens. So like for example, his physical therapist is like he's doing physical therapy and stuff because he has to learn to walk again and things like that. He touches her and he's like, "Oh crap, you left your stove on this morning. You need to call the fire department or your house is going to burn down." And of course that freaks her out or whatever. But it's true, and so he saves her house from getting burned down. But then she's like, "I don't want to talk to you anymore because you scare me." And then it's a really cool book too because he doesn't want the publicity. He doesn't want people to know that he can do it. But then of course the media comes after him, and there's like this guy who's like runs a psychic column in some kind of tabloid magazine that's like wants to hire him and stuff. And he's like, "I don't want any of that." But then also, so there's like two main plot lines kind of. And I was reading this book and I got to the end of this. There's like a plot line where the police kind of come to him and are like, "Hey, you got to help us find a serial killer. Use your psychic powers to help us track down this serial killer." And they do, and they find him, and they catch him or whatever. And at that point I was like, "Oh, cool, the book's over. That's like the end." But there was like still like 180 pages left, and I was like, "Okay, so what's going to happen now?" And then it gets into some more stuff, philosophically around like if you knew someone was going to do something like start a nuclear war, would it be okay to like kill that person? Because he goes to like this rally with this politician, and this politician is like crazy, and he like shakes the guy's hand or whatever, and he gets this flash that in like 10 years or whatever the guy's going to get elected president, and then he's going to start a nuclear war, and it's going to destroy the world. And so then he's like battling this whole concept of like, should I kill this guy to prevent that from happening? Which is a really interesting idea, and then it comes up, it's like, oh, if you could go back in time and kill Hitler, would you? Should you? Is it, what if it causes worse things to happen? Which is an idea that Stephen King has tackled in other books. Apparently, I haven't read it, but I know sort of what it's about. 11/22/63 is about a guy who goes back in time and tries to stop JFK from being assassinated. And kind of tackles some of those ideas too, which, by the way, Stephen King has been talking about that forever. Like, he references JFK in almost every novel that I've read of his. He talks about it in this book a lot. He talks about it just all the time. I think that's an idea that has gone back to before even he started writing Carrie or any of these books. So I am excited to read 11/22/63. I probably won't get to it for a while because it's in I think it was published in 2011. So I got a ways to go before I get there, but maybe I'll jump ahead because I do really want to read it. But anyway, so this, I've heard people say that this is like a prequel, kind of. Like they're like related, or 11/22/63 is kind of a sequel to this. Not really, but the way that they're structured is they deal with similar themes. So anyway, again, one of my favorites. It's so good. It's super underrated. I highly recommend it. And I haven't seen the movie. It's got Christopher Walken in it, and apparently it's really good, but I haven't seen it. So Anyway, that concludes the 1970s. That was the last book he published. So yeah, next time we touch base around this, we'll be talking about the books from the 80s. There are a lot of them. He wrote a lot of books in the 1980s. So yeah, it might take us a little longer, but that's okay. I appreciate you guys watching my videos. Like and subscribe if you want to see more stuff like this, and if you want to get updated on the Stephen King stuff. Yeah, thanks for watching. Talk to you guys later. Peace.